I'm Michael Sabbeth for the Honorable Hunter. This is my friend and colleague Bart Miller, manager and gunsmith at the Centennial Gun Club. We're going to talk about aspects of gunsmithing that perhaps many shooters, hunters haven't thought about, particularly the ethical, character building aspects of being a gunsmith. So, a few moments of background. I've known you how many years, Bart?
Oh, at least 15.
15
Yep.
years. You've worked on some of my firearms. You've worked on the firearms of many of my friends and colleagues with the Rocky Mountain Vintagers. So far, nobody's complained.
Well, good.
Yeah. And in fact, one of our interactions was several years ago when you and I were discussing a special project that you worked on to develop and build a firearm. I think it was a rifle for a severely disabled individual. So you go beyond just repairing firearms, and in fact that's kind of the theme of our visit today, going beyond. I have some notes. I always have notes, and you're here. I had shared with you why I wanted to talk to you, what the themes are, the Honorable Hunter, and they resonated with you. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, very much. I don't think a lot of people take the time to take the approach that you've taken with ethics and trying to make sure that in the industry we do things that are represent the industry well, represent our different aspects of the industry.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're not a newcomer to this, are you?
I'm not. Nope.
You've been around how long?
Well, I start my 40th year
40
this
years.
month, so
It's a lot of longevity.
it is. Yep.
You don't get to do this work 40 years by making mistakes.
Well, not too many. Not too many, that's for sure.
Not too many.
Yeah.
One of the most intriguing aspects when you and I visited, and it was about 6 weeks ago, right here at the gun club, you informed me of a statement that you wrote. You called it the Creed.
Yeah, the Gunsmiths Creed.
The Gunsmith's Creed. Tell us about how that came about. It didn't start gunsmithing. How did it come about?
You bet. So one of the things that I've looked at over the years as time has gone by is what are the standards within the industry? You look at automotive industry, doctors have their own oath that they take. There are different creeds or codes that people operate by, and I'd always wondered why there wasn't kind of a central document,
Something unifying.
Something unifying, that's correct, that helped maybe best express the ethics and standards for the industry.
It not only best expressed the ethics and standard, but I think it's fair to say in your case actually created ethics and standards.
Yes, my second oldest son was graduating from a aircraft mechanics school, and they pulled up the aircraft mechanics creed, and I looked at it and I'm like, that's it. That's kind of the avenue. That's the kind of that document that I've been looking for, because that encapsulated really what I was looking to, probably the approach that I needed to take. So I sat down for probably 6 months.
Never got up?
And never got up. And and it took a lot of editing and reviewing and different things, but trying to cover basically ethics, best practices, and standards, and what I thought maybe would be a good approach for the gunsmithing trade.
So, what you saw at your son's graduation was a statement that was inspirational to you you began working on it.
Yes.
And we all know that writing anything takes time.
Yes.
And you review it, and you go again and again. But can you just mention one or two or three of, and maybe a backstory on that, and that will lead into
Sure.
some other conversations.
You bet. One of the most important things is that I never undertake something without thoroughly researching it and doing something that I think would put somebody's life in danger, whether that be from what has been done or something that maybe is not addressed. Have I safety checked it? Have I test fired it? I'll have police officers come in, for instance, and they'll have maybe a shotgun or a handgun that need to have something done. Well, there's more to it than just doing maybe necessarily what they asked to do. Have I gone through and make sure that when I hand it back to them, they can go out on the streets and it could perform. They can rely on that firearm. And there's been several occasions where they'll bring it in for one thing, but I'll say, this doesn't feed correctly, it doesn't fire correctly, or this has an issue.
Well, there are larger themes to me here, and I think our audience would be interested in them. You begin as a gunsmith, it becomes a trade. It is a trade. Mm-hmm. All that's required, there are technical aspects. You have to know which end of the gun the bullet comes out of, little nuances like that. But then it evolves. It becomes a craft, a level of excellence. And then if one continues in investigating and perfecting the craft, it becomes an art. Now, you said to me when we last visited that there are fundamentals in the gunsmithing business, and the fundamentals don't change.
Nope.
What does that mean?
Sure. Technology can change, but the basic standards of do I have a clear idea of what the customer has asked me to do? Have I been clear about conveying that to the customer? Have I done a job that is worthy of, as I mentioned in the creed, a job well done? Could this pass inspection for other gunsmiths or somebody else who knows the gun or the work that was done? Would that pass certain standards? No matter what it is, it has to have certain standards. Did I give the customer all that he asked for? And am I doing everything else associated with the gun that needs to be done?
Okay. I know you told me during our most recent visit you had worked very diligently on crafting that statement, the creed. I read it. It's a couple of hundred words. It was not a simple document, and I made a reference to Aristotle's concept of beauty. Nothing to be added, nothing to be taken away. You wrote that creed a couple of years ago. Does it still hold up? Is it still what you wanted to say?
It is. It is. I've gone back through it, and being human, have been times where I'm like, okay, I kind of need to recenter what maybe I've had a tough week, or for whatever various reasons, I can go back to it and kind of sit there and say, this is why I'm here. This is what I do. This is how I do it.
This is why I'm here. Very interesting. Now, in our discussions, in our texting and emailing and so forth, you gave me some examples, or we discussed some examples, that there was the realization, the vivification of that concept going beyond. Mm-hmm. Going beyond. I know you shared with me anecdotes where somebody came in with a peyote, and I know the name, it was a somewhat pricey shotgun.
Yep.
And it was some small matter with an ejector or extractor something, but you fixed it up and you found some, what was it, a crack or something?
Yeah.
Tell me, is that an example of the creed?
It is. That when somebody brings me something, they're relying on my expertise. They're relying on my judgment to not only gather what do they need to have done, but to evaluate everything. Is there something else on the gun that needs to be done? Like for instance, on the peyote, it had a crack in the tang. He didn't notice it, and it was hard to see.
Right.
However, obviously a very expensive gun, and that crack needs to be repaired. Number one, obviously be very expensive to replace the stock, but the time to catch something like that is early on. They're relying on my judgment to go through and evaluate the gun and all of the things that need to be done.
So the creed is implemented, the creed is applied by you going beyond. A client comes in and says the extractor doesn't work, maybe a typical gunsmith, and I'm not demeaning gunsmiths, it says, okay, I'll fix it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. If they're skilled, they can fix it. But your creed, your ethic says I got to do more.
Yes. So, and part of it is it isn't necessarily that, no matter what kind of mechanic that it is, car mechanic, a gun mechanic, if you will, but you need to look for these things. It's not only being able to do the work, but am I looking for these things for the customer?
That's the key point.
That's the key.
It's having the initiative, having the will to go beyond. It goes beyond technique. It goes beyond technos, as the Greeks would say. Okay, you had another story. Somebody had what I would consider a very beautiful Beretta SO5 sporting clay. I don't know what they go for, but they're pricey, yes? And there was an issue, what was it? It was doubling or something, and you did again, following that creed, following the ethos of that creed, you found something else. What happened there?
Sure. Well, as I got into the gun, it needed a little bit more work with the ejectors, and it wasn't timed correctly. And if you have, it's like otherwise it's like having a Ferrari and one cylinder isn't firing correctly.
Good analogy.
Convey that to the customers and say, hey, look, this is what I've noticed. It's in here. I can take care of that. And when the customer knows that you have their best interest in mind and you're transparent about it and you're looking for ways to help them, but they sense that.
But the customer might not even know.
They don't.
They might not even know.
And they rely on trust. You have to be trust your doctor, just a gun doctor. You got to be able to trust them.
And somebody listening to this or watching this video, just think of this, might say, look at this gunsmith, he's making an analogy to a doctor. But actually, the analogy is pretty good, because you shared with me another example of the application of your creed, which is just drenched in ethical considerations and ethical consequences. Tell us about at least one instance you mentioned to me where a police officer came in and he just had a problem with, what was it, the front bead, the front sight? Tell us what you did and how that, not to belabor the obvious, but the moral, ethical consequences of the application of your creed.
Sure. I knew that this particular model tends to be a little bit finicky, cycling shells and things. And so after I put the bead in, I just went out and cycled shells through it, noticed it was hanging up, test fired it, sure enough, it's got an issue, corrected that and handed it back. And of course he's overjoyed because he has something that he knows that works.
He can rely on.
Exactly. It may save somebody else's life, or his own, of course. You mentioned earlier about the doctor. What we try to look at is literally the body of work. We look at the whole body, so to speak.
Okay.
And that's you treat the whole patient. Only my patients don't speak. It doesn't mean that you can't. It won't tell you what's wrong, but
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
You do have to extract it. You do have to kind of listen to the gun.
Yeah.
And
I like that phrase. I like that phrase. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a point, not the point, but a point is, police officer comes in with a gun and presents you with what is actually a very trivial problem, something with a bead. But you find something because of your discipline, your commitment, your sense of ethics, something that could save his life. It becomes, the little front bead becomes an avenue, a path to something that could save his life or the life of somebody else.
Sure.
I find that fascinating. And I'm confident in the audiences that I've spoken to, including lots of little youngsters, Hunter Ed students that are 10 years old, 11 years. This kind of thinking appeals to them. They want to be better people. They want to be stronger people. And so this discussion on what we call your creed, is very foundational. It's nuclear. It's fascinating. You could raise the issue: how come every gunsmith hasn't written their own creed? But that's a different story, right?
It is a different story, and the other piece is everybody has their own standards that they operate by, whether they really know it or not. But
Right.
when you sit down and you start to write it out, sometimes I wrote about the first half was easy, but then it's like, well, I stand for more than that.
Yeah.
And you have to dedicate yourself to it. It's not always easy. We're all human. We have days where we're tired.
Yeah, writing anything. I do a lot of writing. It's an organic process, and you don't start at 6 in the afternoon or evening, finish by 10, and say that's it. It can never be better.
Yeah.
It can never be better. What I try to see these issues, your creed, for example, not just for what they are, but to see them metaphorically, to see them symbolically, to see what they represent greater than the specific words on that plaque. What fascinated me was, as I thought about your creed, what fascinated me was how that creed, the ethic in that creed, expands the moral duty of the gunsmith. It increases the obligation, the duty, and the vision, the task of the gunsmith. What do you...
Absolutely. No, it brings by a broader picture, that we're here to make sure that we understand what he's going to be, what the gun needs to be able to do, what are his needs, what are his expectations, and extract that information. It can be a blessing or a curse when you're checking.
Exactly. Yes.
Absolutely. If I don't understand what he wants to use it for, and I gather that information, I'm like, oh, okay. Well, if you're going to use this in this application, then here's some other things to think about. So he's satisfied with the total product and performance, not just can I do the task. It's a different mindset, and mindset is key.
Well, that was the next word I was going, because you used mindset when you and I spoke a few weeks ago, and when we reviewed our conversation that I took notes on. The mindset is foundational. The mindset is fundamental. And again, the mindset goes beyond the technique, the technos. And again, like the policeman who came in and says, fix the bead, and you fix it, and he's happy until his gun malfunctions and he ends up on a ventilator or worse.
Yes.
So tell me what you mean by mindset.
Your approach, your standards, your end goal. So how you approach, it's how you your initial approach to working with a customer and working with a gun. And you never work with one without working on the other, because
interesting.
the gun's got to perform for the person. So if I can understand what he needs, and I'm open to that, and I want to understand what he's doing. This gun's for him. This is his, what he wants to use the gun for. That's his tool. That's his pride and joy. Sometimes it's just I want to hang it on the wall and enjoy it, but I want to make it look aged. Well, not a problem. We can do that. The answer is almost always yes. Almost always yes.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of extracting what the finished product needs to look like, what it needs to do.
Well, there's really more in what you're saying, which we covered, I think, either directly or obliquely. But the mindset has to be, in essence, I am a caretaker. Mm-hmm. I am a steward. I have responsibilities.
Yep.
Now, you said to me, you said, Michael, the gunsmithing is drenched in ethics. It's all about ethics. I think that's what your phrase was. All about ethics. And I think about it, and I said, well, I really hadn't considered that too much. It's not something that's on my mind. I bring in a firearm for you to look at. I say, fix it. And a week or two later, you call me and say, I fixed it. I said, good, I'll be in. You want a hamburger? No, I'm busy. But it's the ethics that are of interest to me mostly, and I believe the kinds of people who will watch my video and who read my work and find resonance in my work, that is their primary interest. So how do you comment? The ethics are everywhere. How so?
Sure. It's because we are responsible for something that could cause harm, or maybe if it doesn't perform, affects their hunt, or affects the ability for somebody to defend themselves. Or we've talked about the police officer aspect, but there's the concealed carry gun that somebody carries. They need to know that in the moment of truth, they don't even have to think about it working or not, or in my shooting point of impact. Or if to a lesser degree, if I'm going on a hunt, I've spent all this money, all this time, it's my job to make sure they don't get out into the field and they have the gun that doesn't work. Because I'm going to tell you, it's happened to me, and I'm like, you're right, I should have checked that, and I didn't. Yeah. That's part of the, I've made plenty of errors. Certainly, but I try not to make the same mistake twice.
Very good. Well, the concept of ethics, you tell me if this makes any sense to you. The concept of ethics actually flows into, like quicksilver, into the concept of character. Mm-hmm. I sense that it's the character, your character, not trying to be fawning here.
Keep going. You're doing fine.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Your character, the traits that propel you, because self-discipline, mm-hmm. Mastering the craft, keeping up with the literature, keeping up with the changes, dealing with the tedium, doing the same thing, I'm sure, many times a day or a week, the filing and the fitting, and maintaining your commitment to excellence.
You're hitting the nail on the head, and here's why. Because you cannot achieve the things mentioned in the creed without developing all these other things. Character, ethics. What do I do when nobody's watching? As it's been defined many times before. But you can't achieve those things. You can't achieve what's in the creed without doing all the homework, all the behind-the-scenes stuff, or the interaction with the customer and your approach to the trade. you can't do it. And that's what it is. It's meant to extract the most out of people and making them aware there's a whole nother world beyond the ability just to do mechanical work.
Exactly. That's exactly the theme that I believe exists. I hope I'm not fantasizing, but I think that is a foundational point. You cannot achieve excellence. And in your craft, your trade, your art, you really have to be excellent, because people can die. But you can't do that without a sense of ethics, and you can't achieve the ethics without the character.
That's right.
Would that be fair?
That's absolutely right. So I'm going to give you just a quick backstory on some of the other motivation behind the creed.
Okay, sure.
If I hire a student out of the gunsmith school, and of course, naturally, School of Hard Knocks, I have the degree from there.
Right.
But a lot of students will come out and I'll hire a student and they'll be in the shop for 3 or 4 months. And usually I'll take them to lunch at that point and I'll say, so what surprises you about working in the shop? And they're like, I had no idea how much we work with customers, how much behind the scenes stuff there is about having certain standards. How do I know when something's right? All of those things. And it got me to thinking a little bit more about these students really do need to know more, that there's the nuts and bolts of stuff, but when you get out and you apply the trade, when you apply the craft, there's a whole lot to it. So the first person I ever showed the rough draft of the Gunsmith's Creed was to a gentleman named Jared McNeely. Okay. He is now the dean at SDI, one of the deans at SDI, Dean of Technology.
What is SDI?
The Sonoran Desert Institute.
Okay.
And all I did was hand him the piece of paper and I had him start reading. And he got down to like the third or fourth thing and he's like, oh my gosh, do we need this? We meaning the industry.
Right.
And he instantly got it.
Yeah.
It's something that currently the Gunsmith's Creed hangs in the lobby of the Colorado School of Trades, the Gunsmith School in Lakewood. Not as a part of their curriculum, but as part of the culture.
Okay.
And they'll have students go up there and read through it. And we just hired a student, and he said, it's interesting because the more I'm here, the more I see all the little things in the creed start to show up in the daily life of the things that we do. It's like, well, it's meant to reflect, but it's also meant to set a standard of goals that you can achieve. You just don't show up and you're there. It's a never-ending process.
Indeed. As long as there's life, there's the opportunity to learn and improve. I hadn't thought of this question, but I'm going to ask you. What do you find to be the most effective method, or plural methods, for inspiring your new gunsmith employees to elevate their standards, to embody that creed? How do you do it?
Sure. Basically, one of the things that I do is I have them sign every ticket that they do. May seem like a simple thing, but I tell them, you are putting your signature, your signature is on that work. Can you show that to a previous instructor, another peer in the industry?
You make it personal.
You make it personal, because it is personal.
Yes.
And it needs to be personal. Is this what you stand for? Is that all the more that you can do? Have you done the job? Remember, your name is going on it. And that simple thing, every single one of the work tickets that we put out has 2 signatures. It has the signature of the gunsmith that did the work, and it has mine, because I also sign off on the work to make sure that the standards are there. Every single job has my signature.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in kind of a concluding comment, you said to me, among other things, you said you have a passion for this work, and what guides you, what propels you, is you want to make a difference. You want to make your craft better. You want to make the world safer in the use of firearms. What would you say? What would you
Sure.
add to that?
I heard somebody talk once about a sport that they were in, and I think it's football. For the life of me, I can't remember exactly who said it, but I remember the concept that he portrayed, conveyed, and that was, you know, in the beginning, you want to learn the game. As you're going along in your career, you want to become the best at your craft, your
Okay.
trade. And at the end, you want to, if you have a real passion for it, you want to improve. You want to change the trade, the craft, that type of thing. And the only thing I could have come up with, because I'm not smart enough to think of anything else, is the creed. Just that these are standards that no matter who you are, whether you're a custom stock maker, an engraver, you specialize in whatever specialty there is within gunsmithing. This applies to every aspect of gunsmithing, and hopefully in a way that hopefully helps set a standard, best practices and ethics to increase the reputation that gunsmiths have across the board.
So, what do we take away from this? The gunsmithing we have is technique, there's skill, knowledge, study, but to bring it to an art, to transition to an art, there's the ethics, and then there's ultimately the character of the gunsmith. Would you agree?
Agreed.
Okay, well, I'm Michael Sabbeth for the Honorable Hunter, and here is my friend and colleague, Bart Miller, for the Honorable Hunter. Thank you.
Thank you.